Clean Kaivalya Clean Kaivalya Clean Kaivalya Check. Okay, we are on. I think we have the audio now. Check. Okay, we're good. Sorry about that. All right. As always, thank you for your heartfelt. It's. Please accept my heartfelt gratitude for giving us this chance to share our learning and our path with you all. It is our desire and hope that you might get some tips to improve your own path towards enlightenment. In today's class, I want to take up some of the comments and feedback that I got, and I got plenty of them. Some on YouTube channel is Sebas comments and couple of emails and a lot of text messages. So I was actually delightfully surprised that there was so much interest in the topic that I had shared last time, and we had entitled it as Mantra Lifestyle. So I want to start with that, but as always with all these learnings, we start mindfully. So let us chant the 3 Oms and take our minds to that divine place, Chidambaram, where this concept of space and dance and sound was first shared with mankind. I'm having problems with some audio, so please bear with me. So what I did was I collected these comments and feedbacks and categorized them because they were all based on what we spoke last time, and I'll try and address these in today's class. So I don't want to keep this for some other later class. That way we'll have a connection between that class and this one. Before I begin, I want to thank you for your comments, feedback, questions. That's the whole idea of, I don't know all these answers, but it gives us a platform to share our perspectives. And then you might say, oh, okay, I didn't think of it that way. Let me start thinking on those lines now. And when you comment or when you share a thought, I start thinking, oh, wow, that's a great thought that somebody shared, right? So thank you for your participation. That's how this mutual learning becomes a real satsang, if you will. Satsang is the company where we discuss and learn and talk about the truth. All right, so the first thing that came about was, of course, we had talked about food in the last class. If you remember, I had said that we need to leave a quarter portion of our stomach empty. Now, I had more than 2 messages asking where in the Gita it is said. Now there is a sloka, like I mentioned in the last class, there is a sloka that talks about 4 types of food that I eat, and therefore bless these 4 types of food. That is a kind of, the prayer goes. It's not a prayer, it's more of a chant where Krishna says, I am that. I am the 4 types of food, and I am that fire that digests the 4 types of food. So the question comes in, what is that 4 types of food that is talked about? And the 4 types of food are solids, semi-solids, liquids, and the 4th one is commonly called emptiness. It's not really empty, so you leave air. So you say air or empty space. So that is the idea of a healthy eating habit, right? And obviously the question comes up, so how do I know that there is a quarter empty? That's a good question. I don't believe that this is a mathematical formula, that somehow we need to have a gadget to measure whether there is 75% filled up and 25% empty, and if there's a 25% solid or 25% liquid, how do we measure that? It's not a hardcore scientific or mathematical rule that one needs to follow here. Because it is said in 4 parts, it's a guideline that these are the 4 kinds of food. Make sure you have them all in equal quantities. Now, in practice, an ideal way to do it is you drink water which is liquid. Water, or let's say in India, people have buttermilk or lassi, if you will. Not the sweet one, not the one with sugar, just the regular one with salt. So it is a good idea to have that in the beginning. If you're just having water, it's a good idea to actually have it in the beginning. So it kind of quells your craving to eat more. Normally, like I said, we are in the part where we indulge in more eating rather than less. And therefore, one way to prevent that, one way to make sure that the quarter of our stomach is filled with water or liquid is drink before the meal, not during the meal, not after the meal, but before the meal, because it fills your stomach, and then therefore you will sit on the plate not craving to eat, right? It's a good idea, something for you to think about. If you don't drink any of those other things, just water, maybe half a glass of water or a 3/4 cup of water, whatever it is, a glass. Don't fill yourself up, because we're only talking of a quarter stomach. Now the stomach itself is elastic in nature. So as you eat a little less in quantity, the stomach starts shrinking. We have expanded it by overeating. So you have to allow it to shrink, and that comes over a period of time. It is not going to happen overnight. That's a whole different matter altogether. But a good idea for you is, because during meal, if you say I have to also do liquids and drink water during the meal, then it tends to dilute the digestive juices, and the food is not properly digested. So about 15 minutes or 30 minutes before the meal, you drink your water. So that's when your meal starts, 30 minutes before. Okay. water or buttermilk or lassi or whatever it is that you want to drink, you drink it before, and then you prepare yourself, wait for the 30 minutes to pass, 20 to 30 minutes or so. Again, it's not a hardcore rule. Yeah, you can try it and see. And then when you sit for the meal, the stomach is kind of cleansed with that water has gone down, and then you're ready to eat. Now, as far as, so your quarter is already filled, and the other quarter has to be empty. So now you know that I have to eat, and solid and semi-solid is normally mixed in our regular cooked meal, or even if it's a salad, we'll have some solids, some semi-solids, and so on. Fruits, berries, these kind of things that go into a salad can be considered semi-solid because you can easily crush them, right? Solids are like greens, leaves, and so on. Nuts are all solid. So when you eat, you always finish and stop when you know that you can eat much more. That's the idea. One of the reasons why we feel lethargic after food, it is never meant to be. Actually, after food, we never meant to be lethargic. Like we ate, then oh gosh, now in 10 minutes I'm feeling drowsy, I want to sleep, you feel a little drowsy. That's because of a lot of carbs and sugar that goes into the system. So it begins to pull the energy down. Wasn't food meant to actually give us more energy? So you see right there is a contradiction. Nevertheless, that is one side of the picture. But even there, if we reduce the quantity and keep half a stomach, in other words, the quarter stomach empty, then because a quarter is already filled with water earlier, then you will not feel so lethargic after food. You will still be active and you'll be able to carry on your day-to-day activities, especially after breakfast, after lunch, and so on. So you wouldn't crave for that one more cup of coffee to give you the dopamine rush and you have to be staying awake and things like that. That kind of feeling will go away if you learn to eat light. And what happens is, because you keep that space empty, your stomach will gently start to shrink. And this is a long-term thing. Don't expect it to happen in a week or 2 weeks if you have a larger stomach. That's a whole diet plan, and some way, slowly I have to address that. We will talk about it in another context, but then the idea is you will feel like I can eat more, but you know what? I feel it's perfect. So you have to listen to the body and you will begin to know. Some days you might slip and you might eat a little more than you wanted to. Some days you might eat less, and so on. But over a period of time, within a few weeks, maybe 4 to 6 weeks, you will learn to listen to your body, because you will understand, okay, now my sleep has improved because I'm eating a very light dinner. So that kind of thing will fall in place. So please be patient with this. There is no magical technique or no gadget where you can look at. There's no app that will say, okay, you've had your meal, enough, stop there. Because it depends on age, size, fitness, abilities, and your lifestyle, and so on and so forth. A warrior needs to eat more than a teacher, right? So it all depends. An athlete, on the other hand, eats a different kind of food altogether versus a normal person who's not an athlete. So all of that changes from person to person. But no matter what you are, it is always good to leave. At this point, just think, I want to always leave a little portion empty. That's it, number one. Number two is liquids. I will have it at least 20 to 30 minutes before my meal. Just think about that. Try and implement that and see if that works for you. Okay, so that was a couple of people, more than a couple of people had asked me. So I hope I've kind of given you an idea how to go about it. Now, we also spoke about fasting. Fasting is providing space in between meals. Now, meals itself, so we had talked about different kinds. There was a comment or two about solids, but solids also have space in them. All that becomes theory. Any solid has space within them, right? The liquids have a little more space. I'm talking of atoms and molecules. The more condensed they are, the more solid a matter is. Now, all that is, of course, the theory part of it. But for us, in our day-to-day experience, when I see a solid, I see a solid. There is no space. My hand doesn't go through this, right? So there is one thing in theory, in the subatomic world, there is a different level of reality. But in this dimension, in this world, the reality changes. Solid is solid. And therefore, for me, I wouldn't worry about whether there is space inside the solid and so on. It is solids, liquids, semi-solids, and emptiness. Now, when we talked of fasting, I spoke about providing space in between these meals. It is very important because we give room for our body to assimilate that food, digest that food, and the digestive system to rest. That is the first and the foremost benefit of fasting, is you give the digestive system time to rest. So the insulin that has got up, the pancreas that has shot up and all of that, everything comes back to normal and settles down. Give that time to happen. If you're going to, within 2 hours after food, you're going to eat again, then again the insulin shoots up, and constantly insulin spikes in your body is going to make the body what is called insulin resistant. We'll again talk about all this slowly. I'm trying to gather my thoughts and present it in a way that everybody can follow and understand this without jumping to conclusions. But if we don't give space between food and constantly snack, saying I'm hungry, then we are eating out of habit, not out of necessity. The body has enough fat, like I said earlier as well. The body has enough fat for us to survive for weeks, if not months. So nothing is going to happen. But if we constantly just keep eating simply because we're habituated, we are just not giving space in between meals. So the body is, number one, consistently digesting food, trying to regulate the blood sugar levels and so on and so forth constantly. How long can it do? How many years, how many decades can it do? So what happens is after 30 years, after 40 years of continuous practice like this, it starts giving up. It becomes insulin resistant. And then whatever you do, you're not able to lose weight. You say, I tried this diet, that diet, and this and that. You don't lose weight. The body begins to, because the amount of insulin spikes that consistently happens doesn't go down anymore. The body refuses to understand and accept insulin. So then you need more insulin. So then you start taking insulin from outside. That is where we need to avoid getting into that trap. So this is especially for those of you who are in your 30s, and so try and incorporate fasting into your routine. Now, when it comes to fasting itself, are there different types of fasting? Yes. There is fasting in general doesn't mean you have to stop food completely, eating and drinking completely. Now, if you do that, that could be extremes to some people who have blood pressure problems or blood sugar issues. It is not even safe for them to completely stop eating. The body needs liquids, especially water. Not too much, but general water you need, right? So you cannot completely, and perhaps should not, do long-term fastings by completely avoiding even water. In the Sanathana Dharma practice, the ancient practices, only once a year in one day they suggest the no water, no food fasting. That's all. The other days are meant for fasting, and those are different kinds of fasting that you could try and adopt. But there is, so the one kind of fasting is one where you don't drink water and food. That is like everybody thinks that's fasting, and they're right. But that is done perhaps one day, once a year. Not more than that. You don't need to do more than that. Okay? So that's called the Nirjala Ekadashi. Nirjala Ekadashi. Incidentally, June 10th, tomorrow is Nirjala Ekadashi. Okay? So that means on that day it's suggested that you can try skipping food and water completely. But only one Ekadashi in a year comes as Nirjala Ekadashi, not all Ekadashis. What is Ekadashi? So, in this fasting, which days to fast, Sanathana Dharma went further down into the details of the human mind and linked it with the phases of the moon and suggested the 11th day of the lunar cycles is ideal for fasting. Why is the 11th day so ideal for fasting? Because whatever we eat or don't eat, the body reacts to that and it takes 72 hours. In other words, 3 days. So if I eat something today, for that food to finally actually affect my thought process, that food to become my emotions, that food to become my thoughts, if you will, that food to become an energy source that not only fuels the body, but that could happen right away within 24 hours. But then the quality of that food, the type of the food I eat, for it to implement, to influence my thoughts and emotions, it takes 3 days. After 72 hours, it becomes effective, right? So on the 11th day you do this, then the 12th, 13th, 14th, 3 days pass, and the 15th day is either the full moon or the new moon. When the full moon is in full bloom or the moon is non-existent, new moon as we know it. Both these are ideal days for spiritual practices. But on those days, you don't necessarily have to fast. You can if you want to. But more importantly, in order to prepare for those days, the full moon and the new moon days, actually in traditional yoga practice, they don't do yoga asanas or anything. It's only meant for meditation that day, full moon or new moon. Meditation or chanting, depending on, especially new moon, that we know as Amavasya in Sanskrit, or new moon in English. Those are the days where completely the mind has a chance to be annihilated, literally. So you prepare yourself and you meditate on that day or that night, totally. The other one, the full moon, is where you can do prayers, chanting, kirtans, bhajans, mantra chanting, and so on. Okay, so these are the 2 days of intense spiritual practices, the full moon and the new moon. How do you prepare your mind for that? How do you prepare your emotions for that? 3 days before you fast. So Ekadasi is actually a preparation for the new moon and the full moon. Now it doesn't mean that I fasted on the 11th or 12th, 13th, 14th, I'm going to engage in gluttony and I'm going to gorge on all the food. It doesn't mean like that. It's understood that there is a general discipline applied. So there is this kind of fasting where you fast for meditation 3 days later. Now this, if when you do it once, you may not see any visible change. But when you do it for a whole year, in about 11 months' time, after having fasted so many times, you would have fasted 22 times, because every month there are 2 Ekadasis, 2 times 11 days, 11th day comes, right? Ekadasi means 11 in Sanskrit. Eka, Dashi. Eka means 1, Dasha means 10. Ekadasha, Ekadashi is 11. So you get it twice every month. So in about a year, in about 11 months, when the body, every 11 months the body goes through a whole complete change. That is why you have 11 Rudras, you have 11 chants, 11 times you chant the Rudra and so on. All of that is connected to the system in the body itself. Now medical science also has understood that. It takes 11 months for the body to undergo change. So any of these kind of practices that you do, leaving space, quarter space empty, or try a kind of fasting, allow it to happen consistently for about 11 months. Then and then only you will begin to see certain visible changes in your body. Maybe there is less allergy, for example, or something, or your quality of sleep has definitely improved, or you're falling sick less often than before. If you have any kind of wheezing or breathing problem, maybe that improved. All that takes time. Don't expect with one fasting or 2 fastings things to happen. It doesn't happen that way. Now, the other kinds of fasting is where you could say fasting from habitual eating. Now, let us say I put sugar in my coffee in the morning, then I eat something sweet here, sweet there. In a day, I probably eat a lot of sweets in some form or the other. Um, on a fasting day, let me say, I will say, all right, I'm going to completely avoid sugar today. No fruits, no sweets, nothing. Nothing, no fructose, no glucose, none of that goes into my system. So you avoid it. That is one kind of fasting. It's not a very comfortable fast if you are used to feeding your body with glucose, because your body will crave for it. You're going to feel hungry, you're going to get a headache by the end by the evening you're going to crave for sweet. But that's a great kind of fasting. So you fast from things that you are habituated to. Now fasting is always also not limited to food. You can fast from any habit. Suppose you have a habit of sleeping in the afternoon, then you say, all right, today's fasting, I'm going to skip my afternoon sleep. The idea is when you get into a habituated pattern of life, and every day this is exactly has to happen, we become more and more predictable. The word is predictable. We become more and more predictable. We want to break that. Even you should not know what you'll be doing a little later. That's a surprise element you give to the body. Then the metabolism in the body, the life in the body is alive, awake, alert, because it doesn't know what the body will be required to do 2 hours from now or 3 hours from now. So what happens is metabolism stays young, the body stays young, there is a vigor and vitality in the body. Even in exercise regimen, you break the kinds of exercise you do. If you say, I'm going walking every day, 15 minutes, and you do the same route every day, in and out, then say, all right, twice a week I'm going to fast from that walking, and I'm going, in other words, don't give up walking, but skip to do something else. Say, I'm going to climb stairs today, or I'm going to go on an inclined road. I'm going to change the way I do this walking. Okay, so what happens is, suddenly the body intelligence wakes up and says, oh, there is something new coming, right? And so the brain awakens. So what is called the brain-derived neurotropic factors, they become more pronounced. They begin to get produced. The gray matter in the brain increases. So everything good happens. So not only fasting from food, think about any habit you can fast from. You can't break it all right away, but you can fast from it. Once in a while, once in a week or twice a week, you can fast. And every day you can choose a different things to fast from. One day I want to talk about giving up a certain kind of food, or maybe skip coffee one day, right? Or reduce the coffee maybe, if skipping is impossible. But ideally you want to skip once in a while, just skip everything. So that is one day you can give up a sleep, or give up an hour of sleep and get up early, and things like that. Every day you can plan something. What am I going to fast today? It creates this idea of space gets created when we get out of habitual patterns. Then it's like, there is a beat going on, right? So the space between two beats it becomes evident, and the beat is consistent. But there is no variety there. And therefore, after a while, the beat loses its charm. You will not be able to focus on that beat. So, but suppose now as I'm beating like this, I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You see, the beat is the same, but now I'm giving variations. So suddenly, when you're listening to music, it sounds like, wow, that was great. But actually it's just it's a 4 beat. But now I'm giving so many variations. You listen to a drummer playing drums, you listen to somebody playing tabla or mridangam and all these beautiful rhythmic instruments, you will notice the beat, the fundamental beat is the same. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like in South India, you go, in the Carnatic music, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's a beat. But how many variations you can do in that? So similarly, our day and night cycles are a beat. It just goes on. But what we have done is, we have made our life a boring routine. I have to get up in the morning, I go and sit on my chair, I do this, I do that. Everything is very predictable. Now, if somebody is completely indisciplined, then it is a good idea to bring discipline and bring some element of prediction. That is okay for children to learn. Yes, you have to get up early morning every day. You have to do meditation every day at this time. You have to do this, eat at the right time. You're teaching the children that. But if that becomes your habit and you are tying yourself into a routine without even applying your mind to it, then you become completely like a robotic life. That's what it's called. It becomes boring. So then what happens is, if some change is required in life, which comes upon you sometimes, not you don't plan it, something comes upon you, then you feel miserable, you feel completely shaken up, and the whole body is resisting. That's where we are unable to keep up with that change. So think of this space in between beats can change, but the beat itself can be maintained. So your routines in everyday life can be maintained, but bring variety into those routines. Then that space in between will have value to it. Think about it. And thus there are many types. And like I said, fasting is an important topic, but I'm going to approach it carefully, because I know people listen sometimes and jump into something without paying heed to. And fasting can also be harmful. If somebody says, I want to do a long-term fasting and things like that, one has to take in consideration their age, what kind of medications they are taking, and they have to consult with physicians if you are doing it at a much later age. But at a younger age, you can try all kinds of fasting. I have tried lots of kinds of fasting over the last 30 or 40 years. And so now I've settled down to one meal a day, and within a 4 to 5 hour window, I eat right from my coffee to a bowl of nuts and food, and that's it. In the next 20 to 21 hours, sometimes it goes into 22 hours, I will not eat at all. But it's not religion. I'm not, in case I feel really hungry at some point, I will have maybe a spoon of butter or something just to calm my system down. But otherwise, I will not eat. So now we have come, my wife and I, we have come to that. We're coming to that, settling down now finally, after having tried a lot. Those kind of things really open up the mind to so much more room for other great thoughts. That kind of fasting helps. So think about all these thoughts and see how they might apply in your life. Then came, what kind of conversations create space? You say, okay, be very mindful of conversations. What kind of it can create space? You know, there is one quote that I often quote, Eleanor Roosevelt, his quote. And the quote is, her quote, Eleanor, her quote is, great minds discuss ideas. Great minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events. Small minds discuss people. I loved that quote. And I mentioned that quote to Baba, and he said, put it in a drama. So we actually used that quote in one of the dramas. I mean, this is like 30, 40 years ago. But that is how beautiful this quote is. It touched me, and I still keep that in my mind. It's such a powerful quote. Great minds discuss ideas. Average mind discuss events. Everyday events. What to do, what went on, which hotel did you eat, what restaurant you eat. You see, when we get together, for example, look at the kind of conversations. If it is average, oh, what is the movie you saw, what is the game we are watching, what's going on in politics, events, right? Where did you eat, what is the food you ate, and this and that. So it's all about events. It's kind of an average conversation. But if it slips down to people, then it tends to go into small minds. Now you're discussing people. Now I understood that in terms of the teachings of yoga and Sanathana Dharma. What is that? The mind per se has no form. It's not a physical organ. A thought has no form of its own. So when you think of something, the mind is not thinking, you are thinking. What is happening to the mind then? The mind is becoming that object of your thought. The mind is becoming that. The mind takes that. When you visualize something, the mind has become that. And that's how you're able to visualize something. That's how you're able to imagine something, because the mind has become that. Suppose I say, oh, my wife she's always like this. I have to do this, and something I talk. At that point, she's not around. She's not hearing it. My mind has become my wife, who is in that personality that I am projecting out to her. My mind has become that. Whether she is or not is immaterial. When I talk about a person, my mind has become that person. Please remember, this is the most powerful thing in our spiritual progress. When we think, that's why in the path of devotion, in bhakti yoga, it's called yoga. Why is it called yoga? Because when I think of Krishna, when I think of Jesus, when I think of Buddha, when I think of Rama, my mind has become Krishna. My mind has become that. So these are not people. These are not small minds discussing people. These, because Jesus is an idea for us now, right? Krishna is an idea, ideal, a role model. So a mind becomes that. But when I take up a conversation about, let's say, a political leader, and we talk about him or her, then the mind becomes small, and the mind is now constantly rebuilding itself, readjusting itself into the vibrations of that person I'm discussing. And therefore, over a prolonged period, what happens? My mind becomes that person. Think of a robber all the time. Guess what's going to happen? People are going to think you are the robber, right? So that's what happens. So that is the small minds. It's the same thing with average minds. But great minds discuss ideas. When you discuss idea, you're opening up the inner space for creativity. You're thinking out of a box. For example, if I tell you, hey, let's open a restaurant. You might say, okay, great idea. How do we do it? I'll say it should be a restaurant where people don't eat food, where no food is served. Let's build a restaurant. Now see how you and we suddenly came to an empty space. The mind stopped thinking, right? Wait a minute, what? Restaurant? Nobody serves food? Nobody eats food? Then what? Stop. Now you have an idea to think about. So suddenly the mind clears itself from all previous conditioned thinking. Wait a minute, this is something new. I've never heard of this before. Let me think. Say it again, we say, right? Say it again. Okay, restaurant without food. Wait a minute, how is that possible? Why call it a restaurant then? What can we do in that kind of restaurant? So now, great minds discuss ideas. When we discuss ideas, when we discuss concepts, when we discuss things that are creative, then we create space, inner space, inner space. The universe is infinite. There is enough space for all of us to grow as much as we want. So when our inner space is what limits us, when our inner space is opened up, because we are constantly thinking of ideas and not people. Now, think of why Vishnu had 4 arms, why Brahma has 4 faces, not regular faces like yours and mine. Why Shiva has a snake around his neck, a tiger skin around him, and he has a Trishul, and he has a Damaru. That because all of that are symbolic and helps us think now. We are thinking of idea, we are not thinking of a person. Our problem is we reduce that idea into a god, we reduce that into a person, and we are making Shiva is happy, Shiva is sad, Shiva is angry. No. Then we have reduced that idea into a person. Baba would tell often, don't reduce God into a picture. Don't reduce God into a picture. Take the picture to God. In other words, let the symbolism of the picture open your mind to divinity. Don't bring divinity into the picture and say, oh, he's happy with me, he's sad with me, or she is sad with me, she's happy with me. Now we are projecting our emotions onto the divine and reducing divinity down to another person who will somehow get angry and punish you and so on and so forth. Then we create heavens and hells, and then we are worshipping out of fear. We lose space completely. Our space is now limited to, oh my God, where will I go? Whom will I call on to? And so on. Our space becomes limited because we have reduced ideas into people. We have reduced gods into people. So that is why in Sanathana Dharma they created Durga with 8 arms, 16 arms rather. And each arm has a different weapon, because now you look at it and start thinking, what is that? What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? Why is she on a tiger or a lion? What is she doing? What is the symbolism of that divine Shakti, right? Then your mind opens up. It's like thinking of this restaurant without food. How is it possible? Think. And maybe you might come up with a beautiful idea. And suddenly in your world, you'll find a space of expression where your creativity, your uniqueness will find expression in a unique space. How did you create that unique space? Somebody will say, how did you come up with this fantastic idea of a restaurant where nobody eats? It was your unique space you created. Right? So in that uniqueness, we create a new space. And like this, there is infinite space available for you and me to create and express our ideas and creativity. There is no limit to imagination. There is no limit to creative ideas. So our conversations, if we can turn it around and engage in ideas, in creativity. If you are discussing music, think of the music and see, how can we make it creative? How can we make it beautiful? How is that flow coming? Is that flow coming properly? And so on and so forth. For those of you who compose music, for example, for a Chicago workshop that's coming up next week, 2 weeks from now. Oh, wait a minute, next week. We are thinking of doing some chants. So we are thinking, what kind of tunes will help the mind get entrained into that chant? How can we gently keep it meditative, at the same time rhythmic? How can we gently bring variations in the rhythm so we are allowing our intuition to guide us. And at the same time, we are not limiting ourselves to say, this is the rule, however, how can I not break this rule? We'll say, all right, rules are all guidelines. They're all guidelines available to us. There is a raga, there is a beat, there is a particular notations, there's that, all those are guidelines. Now within those guidelines, how can we create a uniqueness, a unique tune, which helps us now? So we get a chance to be creative. We get a chance to explore our inner space. And that's infinite. That's the beauty of it. That's why meditation is so powerful. Because in meditation, you are exploring that inner space that begins to open, reveal the Godhead within you. That is why a shepherd, like a carpenter's son, who was meant to be a shepherd or just a carpenter, became the Son of Man. Because he explored his inner space, allowed that to become fully divine, Jesus became Christ. Krishna, who was a cowherd, was raised as a cowherd. His parents were locked up in a cell. His uncle were out to kill him. So all those bizarre childhood experiences of his didn't bother him. He started thinking, how can I make a difference in life? And that young cowherd and his brother Balarama together, they became the kings and emperors. If you can allow your conversations, internal conversations, external conversations, gently guiding yourself and your friends into thinking of ideas rather than events. Events are just, we drift along. We just drift along. It's neither good or bad, the mind just drifts along. But when you start going down to people, you're shrinking the inner space. Think about that. So it is in the same context, what kind of thoughts create space? Creative thoughts is what creates space, not limited thoughts. Don't limit your thoughts. If you're constantly in the past because of past events, then you're thinking of events. If your mind is in the past, you're thinking of events. If you're holding a grudge against somebody for whatever harm that person might have done to you, however personal that might be, however deep that might be, every time I think of that person or look at that person, if that past event is going to come to the present, then that person may or may not even realize it. But what is happening is your mind is becoming that person, becoming that hurt. And that is going to manifest in your inner space. It won't even affect that person. That person may have forgotten it or may not even known what he or she may have caused. But for me to hold that in my mind, I'm allowing my mind to become that person. And I'm not able to let go. So my past holds on. I hold on to a memory. That's all it is. It's a baggage I am holding on to. I can let go. Just let go. That's why forgiveness plays an important role in all spiritual paths. If you don't know to forgive somebody else, you can't forgive yourself, there is no spirituality. How can you go towards oneness when you have a grudge against or a feeling of difference or something like that, animosity, whatever it is, against somebody else? There's no path to oneness. So you let go. It's all right. You know what? I'm going to let go. Let it slowly disappear from my consciousness. I'm not going to hold it in my consciousness anymore. It's over. A lesson I had to learn, I learned that lesson. Now I let go. Let go of that memory of that person. Let go of the memory that you're holding of that person. And then you will find that thought creates room now for more thoughts, creative thoughts. But if my past is filled with thoughts of what happened and what didn't happen and so on and so forth, then there is no space for me to create more. So Baba's quote is, past is fast. Forget the past. Let go. There are lessons we learn from the past which we will retain in the moment. That is enriching. For example, I stuck my finger into the socket when I was young. I got a shock. Right? So the lesson is what? I will not simply go and put my finger into a live wire or touch a live wire without checking. Right? That is the lesson I learned. That lesson stays with me. But I'm not going to keep brooding over, oh my gosh, 10 years ago when I went near a socket, it shocked me and you know how much I got hurt. Oh God, I was so... And I go on thinking of that event. It's of no use. That event is gone. That was a lesson I learned. Hold on to the lesson. Let go of the event. Let go of that person. Let go of that past. That's what is meant by past is past. Forget the past. Future is not in our hands. At least not at a conscious level. Correct? And therefore, why imagine based on the past what will happen in the future? We are imagination, projecting our fears, our anxieties, our worries many times, not always, but oftentimes into the future. Let go. At this moment, where am I? What can I do with this moment? How can I create space in this moment? And in every moment of my life, if I can create space, guess what the future is going to come? There is no future because future is the present, correct? So every moment I create space internally in my conversations, in my thinking. If I create space, then what is going to happen in my life is there's going to be more room for your home to grow, more room for your riches to grow, more room for your health, more room for your loving friends, more room. Life will create space for you to experience in greater abundance. That is the meaning of abundance. But in the moment, if I constrict, then the future is not going to somehow magically create space. It just won't create space. And when there is no space, how will something be expressed? Like we started with dance, right? You have the Nataraja slide in front of you. He needs space to dance. So how can that dance express itself? How can abundance express in your life? Where is space for it to express? Provide space. How can I provide space? By creating thoughts, focusing on ideas. So in the Bhakti Yoga, they say think of the divine. Think of the divine. And that's what even in the Bible it says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and all these shall be added unto you. That's the idea. In the kingdom of God, in the kingdom of heaven, in that dimension of Shiva consciousness, everything opens. Anything is possible unto the divine, because divine is purely an idea. And in idea, anything is possible, and therefore we live in that anything is possible dimension, then that will settle down into reality, and anything will become possible in your life. So think about that. Now, I bought this question here because it came from one person, but I thought I'll just touch upon it. What kinds of sounds create space inside me? Are there some sounds that can create a space inside me? Okay, I know we talked about thoughts and all of that, but are there just sounds that can create space? And the answer is yes, of course. This is the basis of Bijakshara mantras. Bijakshara mantras are just pure sounds. There is really no meaning. There is no necessity for you to analyze the meaning. They are pure sounds. Now, the best sound, we'll leave Bijaksharas for now. When we talk about mantras, we'll come to that again. The best sound, for example, is Om. Think of it as a sound. No religion attached, nothing attached, just Om. Om. What are we doing here? It's like a buzzer. Buzzer for what? Buzzer to stop your mind thinking and open your heart to experience. That's what the Om does. The Om says stop thinking. Why? Because in Om, as you focus on the sound of Om, there is no meaning. It's just one sound that's coming in. And all you're doing is listening to the sound, chanting it long, so the breath is there, it holds your attention, right? Because you're breathing out and you're trying to elongate the chant. So your attention is there, and you focus on the breath leaving the body, you focus on the sound leaving the body, the breath and the sound, and then you take a deep inhalation. Once again, you go into the sound. You're completely focused in the sound. Guess what's happening? The Akasha within just magically, just simply opens up. If you chant Om like this, mindfully, for 21 times or 30 times, it takes long, and take a deep breath and it takes about 10 minutes or so. In 10 minutes or so, you will be able to calm your mind down to a state of almost silence. Almost. You'll feel so quiet at the end of that. You won't be able to think anything. You have to make an effort to re-kick that, the engine to think. I say this out of practice. For decades we did that in the ashram. Chanting Om every day 21 times. Just only sound, 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 sound. So there are sounds which necessarily not have meaning opens up. That's why melody, music, creates that space. You may not understand the language in which I sing. I may not understand the language in which you sing. So the language, the meaning, the lyrics become secondary in music. In poetry it's different. But in music, the language, the lyrics of the song becomes secondary. In music, melody and rhythm gain priority. What are they? They are sounds. So what happens when you listen to music, irrespective of what language it is, if you can tune into that rhythm and melody, immediately your mind you feel a sense of happiness. Your body sways to the rhythm and you're engaged in that. Even though temporary, it creates a sense of bliss. You forget your temporary pains or stress, and then that provides space. And when you come back, then your ideas become clearer, then your thinking becomes clearer perhaps, right? So sounds. There are musical sounds. Chirping of birds are sounds from nature. It's the sound of the river, sound of the ocean. the crackling of fire. If you have firewood and fireplace in your home, think of it on a cold wintry night when you light fire. All these are beautiful sounds, pure sounds, that suddenly make your mind alert and opens up space inside. It is in this context we are going to discuss mantras, and we'll come to that. Not necessarily, I keep saying this religion, because religion means, for me, I define religion as something which is very dogmatic. Oh, you have to do this like this, otherwise it is bad for you, it's going to harm you, and all of that. So I'm not a proponent of that at all. I don't subscribe to those ideas. I think the spirit is very free, and you as a unique spiritual soul has that freedom to explore all paths, all types, without any fear. That's the whole meaning of spirituality. Every path that you create is unique to you and is real to you and is the right path. My path cannot become your path. Anyway, so that is spirituality. So in that context, we will talk about sounds. And then came an interesting question from a person who said, over a dinner table, if somebody starts talking something, how can I avoid something? Because sometimes they just go on and on and on, and it bogs me down, and I feel odd. If I tell them not to, then I might get misunderstood. So I stand the risk of being misunderstood. How do I do that? Now, I wish I had the answer to that. It's not as simple, I know. But if I were to meet someone, the first time I may not, but in a family conversation, if I were to meet someone, if I know that this person has a tendency to drag everybody down into their path, his or her path, then what I would do is I would lead the conversation instead of waiting for them to start and then worry, oh gosh, now they have started, how do I divert the conversation? I would lead the conversation. So be a leader in your conversation. If the dinner table is a problem, then as you sit down, start a conversation. And because you started the conversation, hold on to that conversation. Correct? Listen to others, of course, and take leads from something very nice, and somebody gives a nice input. Go into that. Make that person talk about ideas. So now what happens is, instead of you sitting and waiting at the receiving end, you become the one who creates that space not only for yourself, but for everybody. Then what happens is, invariably, when you go to the next time dinner, they'll say, hey, that person is so fun. Let's call them for dinner. It's so much fun to engage in nice conversations with them. It'll automatically change. It's not easy, but it's absolutely possible. Absolutely possible. Sometimes wherever I go, I don't know these people, I won't take a chance. I'll just slowly drift into yoga, and I'll talk about something about holistic awareness and health, and everybody's interested in health. So they start asking questions, we engage in conversations. So suddenly I always take charge of a conversation so that I know that I will enjoy their company as well. But if that company seems to go out of my control, then after a while, I have engaged everybody, so nobody can say I'm not social. I do that, then I'll excuse myself and I'll go to somebody else if it's a big gathering. So you have a chance to do that. Don't be a victim of circumstances. You be in charge of circumstances. That's number one. Number two is, there are times you may have to politely excuse yourself. And if people think that, oh, if I talk like this, he may not like it, she may not like it, oh, she just acts too big, he acts too big and very righteous and all of that. Let them think. It's their problem, not yours, right? Don't worry about what other people think of you. Don't worry. It really doesn't matter. If they think, it is their inner space that is getting crowded, not yours. But if you worry about what other people might mistake you, or how they will misunderstand you, what they will talk about you, then you are crowding your own inner space, and then you start building a very small image of yourself. And you build an image saying, somehow, an image of helplessness. Oh, I don't know what to do. I'm just helpless. I can't handle this situation. You're not helpless. You're in control. So don't care about what others think of you. There are times you may have to do that. You may not have to hurt anyone. You can just say, somehow I can't tune into what you're speaking, so it's all right. Now, having said that, if there is an old person, if that person needs just somebody to listen to his or her story, her problems, sit down and listen. Open your heart, listen. At that point, if your inner space is crowded, so be it, because love supersedes that. There are times you may have to make those exceptions because you're giving that person a chance to express himself or herself. Maybe she has nobody to talk to. So these hospital visits that some of y'all do, I know, as part of the social service, you go to old age home or talk to people, terminally ill patients. Talk to them. Listen to what they have to say. There you don't apply any of this, because now you're talking at a very different dimension of oneness there. Then there is no your space, my space, inner space. There is love. Love supersedes all of that. At that point, you just sit and listen to this conversation. Make the person talk. Listen. That person feels listened to, enriched, loved. So don't go to a terminally ill patient and expect some other stories. Listen to whatever they have to give you and let love reign supreme. So these are some of the questions that I wanted to answer. And there was one other question, and I'll talk to that, address that when we come to mantras in due course. And that is, how can sound lead to silence? I thought sound was always sound. But there are sounds, like I said, like the bija mantras and so on. Sounds can lead to silence. And that silence is nothing but empty space. Like I said, when I just shared this thought, let's open a restaurant, but no food will be served, nobody will eat food. Suddenly there was empty space, right? Silence. So suddenly you get space for you to plant whatever thought you want. We will carry on this conversation. It's a very interesting topic. We will learn about sounds. We will learn about some basics of Sanskrit language, because how these sounds were created, the 5 different kinds of sounds that explore your vocal cords completely. And then how from that came mantras and sounds. I know there was a comment on YouTube with regard to Sanskrit. We will touch upon the basics of Sanskrit because it's an important component of the Akasha element. Akasha in our body is in this space, throat, where sound is emanating. Where does sound come from? What kinds of sound come from? The Sanskrit language has explored that beautifully, and we'll take that up as we go along. So this is an interesting learning, hopefully for you. This learning has never ended for me. It continues, and there are very, very, very humbling moments in my life, and I'm sure in all our lives, where we believe in certain things strongly, but we slip and tend to fall. But those are the times you don't feel guilty. You say, oh wow, I didn't know where this came from. How did I indulge in such a conversation? All right, let me get up, dust yourself, and once again continue this path of ever expanding space, inner space. If the inner space expands and you're able to hold people without judgment in your inner space, if you're able to welcome circumstances without resistance, then your inner space will manifest itself as external space, and there will truly be space in you and around you. Thank you as always for patiently listening. Please do offer your comments and questions. I learn from your questions and your comments as well. Let us bring this class to an end with 1 Om and 3 Shantis. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.